Today's lesson will be looking at compound interest. Now, this is the most useful and closest to real life financial maths that you'll probably be doing in this chapter, because this will show you how banks really do calculate interest when you borrow money from them or when you put your money into their bank. So when you borrow money from a bank, they charge you a fee. That's called interest. When you put your money in a bank, they reward you for letting them keep your money. So they pay you interest. So you actually make a profit by leaving your money in the bank. And we're going to work out today with what looks like a bit of a tricky formula, but is not tricky because the calculator does all the work for you to help you find out how much interest you earn if you put your money in the bank, or how much interest they'll charge you if you borrow money from the bank. So I'd like you to copy this. Let's start with the information first. Pretend that you've got $5,000 and you've decided it's too much money to keep under the mattress anymore. I'm going to go put it into the bank. So you go to the bank and you say, here's my $5,000. I would like to invest this $5,000 and put it in your bank. And they say, done. We will invest your money and pay you an interest rate of 6.4% per annum, compounded monthly for 3 years. So all that information is really, really important. $5,000, that's how much you're putting in. The 6.4%, the higher that number, the more money the more interest they're gonna pay you. So in this case, you want that number to be as high as possible because that's how much money or interest they're going to pay you for holding on to your money. Then compounded monthly. The bank can choose how often they pay or compound the interest. So monthly means they're going to compound or pay you interest every month for 3 years. Now, here comes the big formula. I want you to copy this formula down, but I want you to make sure that it looks identical to how it looks on the screen. Every single detail needs to look the same. For starters, there's a plus. Make sure you've got 1 plus. Don't worry about why the formula has 1 plus in the middle, it just does. That is just because if we do that, it gets us straight to the right answer. This is totally different to the formula that your textbook uses. Trust me, this one is way simpler. The one in your book might look easier, but you need to do all these background calculations and all these other working out before you can use their formula. Whereas with this one here, you don't need to do any maths on your own. I'll show you how to put the numbers in the right spots, and then the calculator does the entire thing in one step. So write down this formula, please. The other thing I want you to notice, and I probably should have told you because you've probably already written it, so if you need to, change it. Look at the fractions. They are written that way on purpose. See the top one? That's a small fraction, much smaller than the fraction on the bottom. I'm talking about how long the lines are. That's intentional. That R over N, that line needs to be shorter than the over 100 line. I know it sounds like something pretty small, but when it comes time to typing it in your calculator, you'll realize that you can't get the right answer unless you have a small fraction on top and a longer line at the bottom there. It's really, really important. And the last thing to be careful of, see the T times N, that's a times in between, T times N. Make sure that they're written up the top of the bracket, not just next to the bracket. So it's like a squared type thing. It needs to be written up the top. Okay, now let's try and work out what those letters stand for. You might already know some of those letters. We've seen P, R, and T before. We might be able to guess what A stands for. So if you can, write down what each of those letters you think might stand for, and I'll help you in a second. N, we've never seen before, so I'm happy for you to leave that one blank. But write down as many of them as you can. All right, here are the correct answers, so modify yours if you need to. Make sure for A, write final amount. Please make sure you're adding in any bits that you maybe didn't do when you had a guess on your own. Principal, to remind you what principal means in this context, make sure you've written starting amount in brackets next to it. Next to rate, put a % sign just to remind yourself that that's always the percentage that we're looking for in the question. T, instead of just writing time, make sure you've written time in years next to it because that's really important as well. Now, N. N means how often interest is charged per year. So write that down. Then this table on the right-hand side will help you calculate N. Again, it's a fair bit of writing to do now, but once you've got this in your notes, you'll just look back to this for every single question and it takes you straight to all the information you need so that your calculator can do all the work for you. So to work out what N is, all you need to do is look at the question because it will always have the word compounded in it somewhere. That word will always be written in every question you do in this topic. Will always have the word compounded, or interest will be compounding. You'll see that word compound somewhere. After that word, that's the special key. Because after the word compound, you'll always see one of these words: annually, half yearly, quarterly, monthly, whatever. And that's the clue as to what N is. So if the question, before we start looking at the question, you need to write something next to each of these N's. If I said annually, I want you to think how many times a year is annually. If I said I'm going to pay you annually, think how many times a year would I be paying you? I want you to do that for every single one of those dot points there. If I said I'm paying you 6 monthly, how many times a year would I be paying you? If I was paying you monthly, how many times a year would I be paying you? That's the number you need to write down next to each of those N's. It also means you have to know how many weeks and days are in a year. If I'm paying you weekly, you have to know how many weeks are in a year. Same for daily. Please, I hope you know that information. Otherwise, the answers will be up after you pause it. But have a go on your own. All right, here are each of the answers. Those numbers are really important because we will come back to them for every single question because that's how we know what number to put instead of the letter N. Now let's solve our problem of how much money are we going to have in our account. So the question I'm asking you now is, you're investing this money, $5,000. I want to know how much money will be in your account after the 3 years if they're charging you or giving you an interest rate of 6.4%. So write down the letters. Don't write down the letter A because that's what we're trying to find out. But next to the letters P, R, T, and N, I want you to write down what number they would be from this scenario. Remember, P, that's our starting amount. R, that's the percentage. T is time in years. And N, look for the word compounded. See if you can work out what number goes with it. Go. Okay, there's our info. The only tricky one, I believe, would be N. We've written 12 there because look at the question. It says compounded monthly. Now, if you look at those rules you wrote down, next to monthly, it says N equals 12. So that's it. Yes, there are 2 N's in the formula. They're both the same. That means you have to write 12 twice when you write the formula. So try that now, please. Put all that information into your formula and then we'll come over to the whiteboard. If you've put the numbers in the right spots, this is what your formula should look like. One thing to point out as well, don't use the % sign when you're writing it down here or on the formula. The calculator will do all that for you. So we've swapped the P for 5,000, the R at the top is 6.4. See that there was an N here and an N here, so I've put a 12 at both of those places. Now the tricky part here is, make it look on your calculator exactly the same as it does on your page. To get this fraction, there's only one way to make the fraction look like this. You need to double tap the fraction button. So start typing as normal, but when you get up to 1, then write plus, then double tap the fraction button. That will give you small fraction on top and then bigger fraction on the bottom. You need to learn how to do that so you can get to the right answer. And when you get to here, to do the 3 times 12, make sure the 3 times 12 is up the top of the bracket, not just next to it. So you need to press that little button that looks like a triangle like that on your calculator. That's what gets the numbers up the top there, and it doesn't just write them next to the bracket. So I'd like you to type that in your calculator now, and then I'll put the answer up shortly after. If you're having trouble or you can't get the calculator to look like the whiteboard, come back to the video chat and I can give you a hand. If you typed it in correctly, it has come up with this answer here. Important things to note. We're always talking about money, so make sure there's a dollar sign on your answer. And we always want 2 decimal places because we're talking about dollars and cents. So we always want to round to 2 decimal places. So this number here means there is now $6,055.26 in your bank account. So you put $5,000 in, but because they've been paying you interest for 3 years, you've now got $6,055 in your account. You made a profit of over $1,000 just by leaving your money in the bank. But this is a real thing, and this is exactly what banks do if you leave your money with them. We'll try 2 more questions. Let's get a bit more practice at typing it in our calculator. Next scenario. You need to borrow some money this time. So you've gone to the bank and said, I need to borrow $4,500. And they say, sure, here it is, but we'll be charging you an interest rate of 9% per annum for 2 years, and the interest will be compounded quarterly. So that means they're giving you the money, but this time interest is a bad thing because they're saying we're going to make you pay extra because we're letting you take this money from us. So the interest rate, this time we don't want it to be a high number because that means we're going to have to pay extra money back to the bank. Your loan is for 2 years, that means you've got 2 years to pay back your loan, and they've decided this time they're going to compound the interest quarterly. That's a big clue so that you know what N equals. See if you can fill in your 4 letters here, P, R, T and N, with what they are in this scenario. Your starting amount is $4,500. The interest rate is 9%. Remember, you don't need to put a percent sign there. 2 years. And because it says compounded quarterly, if we look back at our table that we wrote down at the start, quarterly means N equals 4. That's why I've written a 4 there. Next step, substitute those numbers into your formula. Make sure you've got small fraction on top, bigger fraction on the bottom, and see if it looks the same as mine. If you've put all the numbers in the right spots, it will look like this. That's our P, that's our starting amount. 1 plus is always just 1 plus. Now we've got a 4 here and here because there's an N in 2 places. Now, see if you can type it in the calculator. I want to know what's the total amount, or the A means final amount. What's the final amount that you will need to pay back to the bank? Type it in the calculator and that will give you your answer. Again, we've rounded off to 2 decimal places because it's money in dollars and cents. You need to pay back to the bank $5,376.74 because they charge you interest. So you borrowed this much, $4,500, but after all these calculations, you found you need to pay back this much. They've charged you interest. So you're paying back an extra over $800, $876 extra because of the compound interest. One more question. This time you've got some money, you've got some birthday, some Christmas money, your job's been paying you cash, you've got all this money that you want to put in the bank. You've got $3,000. The bank says, yep, come give it to us. If you give it to us and let us hold on to it for 4 years, we'll pay you an interest rate of 5.8% per annum and it'll be compounded weekly. You say, sounds good. This time interest is a good thing because you're putting your money in the bank, so they're going to be paying you interest. You're doing them a favour by giving them your money, so they're going to pay you interest. Work out what P, R, T and N stand for, and I'll do the same. Here they are. Remember, don't worry about putting percent signs here. This time, N is 52, because the big clue in the question was compounded weekly. Weekly, if we look back to our little chart we made for how to work out what N is, weekly equals 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. All right, now put those numbers into the formula. Here it is. We've put the 52 where the N should go. The rest I think you're getting a hang of it by now. But this time I have 2 questions for you. Have a look at these 2 questions and then decide what you need to do to work out each one. Here are my 2 questions for you. What is your investment worth at maturity? Now, maturity is just a fancy word for at the end of the 4 years. So whenever you see a question talking about when something matures, that just means the end of T, the end of how many years it is. And the other question, how much interest did you earn? So if you use this formula, see if you can work out which question this will answer, and then see if you can work out what you need to do to find the other question. Go. Okay, at maturity is just a fancy word for saying the final amount. So if you type that formula in as normal, the answer that it gives you is the answer to question 1. That's just how much your investment is worth after 4 years. You've got a bit more in there than what you started with. So the last question, how much interest did you earn? Show any working out that you need to. Look at how much you started with and look at how much money you've got now. That'll tell you how much interest you earned. Because you started with $3,000 and you ended up with $3,782.87, that means you earned $782 interest and 87 cents. Okay, that's it.